Could it be anything to do with the anti-vaccine?
That could be. And I never used a mask on the show. Okay, everyone's in that one. Everyone's in that one. Okay.
What about Lily? You cut Lily out.
Everyone's. Oh, Lily, you gotta.
You could probably put the high stool here.
No, Lily, you're gonna sit over here. We can get you right here.
And I could play the guitar and I could come up with the Beaver Blues.
Okay, Beaver Blues. That's Facebook. That's Instagram. I think we're all in that one. You can't see because of those comments. She's cut off a little. Can you see everyone in that one? I can't see that one. Can you see it?
No, you two at the end are out.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We're almost ready. Playing on the set. Oh, there we go. That's perfect. Okay, this is the first time we can actually watch ourselves over here. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first episode of a brand new show called The Emperors Have No Clothes, because the last show called Live from Normal Heights was kicked off of YouTube. No, it was kicked off of Facebook and kicked off of Instagram. But on YouTube, we're still calling it Live from Normal Heights, and this is the episode 26 of that show. And we have a whole group of people here today. You remember the Bee people? They're way over there. They were on our show, the Bee people. And I tried to get a good version of it. It sounds bad, but we'll fix that. But we have Eric here today, and we're going to start talking with Eric. Eric Robinson. And we're going to talk about beavers or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I always, when I say that word beaver, I'm thinking, some sexual innuendo, but yeah. But what about beavers have you studied?
So it turns out that the beavers, I was reading a book about 1830. There were beavers all over Southern California. And they were, at that time, California was Mexico, part of Mexico. Yeah. And they were exporting pelts, like cattle pelts, 40,000 per shipload, beaver pelts, and otter pelts. They made the Southern California into a fur desert. They took all the fur-bearing animals, turned them into pelts, and shipped them all back to the East Coast to make products out of it, right? Yeah. So the poor beaver, by 1850, when California became a state, the beavers were extinct in Southern California already. And they've been extinct ever since. So people coming to California never knew the beavers were here, and they didn't think they were native. And they said, oh, beavers are non-native, they're invasive. And I said, you're crazy. Look at this book. Here it is. They've been here, they were here forever, and we exterminated them. So now, there's a big move. 11 western states, except for California, are bringing the beavers back. Oregon and Washington are in the lead. They're bringing beavers back to all their waterways, bringing back fish and all of their wildlife. It increases the hydrology of the soil. It stops all the damage to wildlife during wildfires. It helps mitigate against drought or global desertification. It's like this awesome animal. And other places around the world do things called beaver dam analogs. They try to pretend they're beavers, and they build dams like beavers do to hold the water on the land. But we don't have to do that here. We've got beavers. There's some up in Fallbrook, 40 miles from here. And so I found the beavers, and it's my mission now to see that we put the beavers back in the land where they belong.
Wow.
It's cool. And so 2 weekends ago, I went to Colorado. I met Sherry Tippy, and she's the beaver tracking goddess. So she, at age 30, was this, young, beautiful woman, and she heard they were going to exterminate these beavers that were flooding the golf course. So she went out, and she said, I'm going to learn how to catch these beavers. Everybody said, you can't do that. You're a girl or whatever. You're a model. You're beautiful. And she said, I'm going to do it. So she made that her life's quest. And she went and talked to the wildlife director. She said, can I use your traps? He said, sure. And she said, can you show me how to use them? He goes, don't worry about it, honey. You'll figure it out. Well, it turned out he didn't know himself. They were still in the box. He didn't even know how to use them. And so she figured it out. And the first time out, she caught 2 beavers. And she caught them and she trapped them and put them out in the area where they could be free and they could live their life and not be tortured by golfers. So it was an amazing story. So she's been trapping beavers for 43 years. And so now she's in her 70s and she's starting to have some physical problems. So my mission is to build a team around her to help sustain her legacy. And she's been responsible for perhaps 1,000 beavers that she's saved, right? But you think of like all the baby beavers from that, there's probably 50,000 beavers out there hairdresser / model / dancer that became a beaver rescuer. Yeah. Anyway, it was cool. Kind of a cool.
So they make. You said they make their own. They make their own dams, and
Right.
I guess they know how to make the water flow, or that's how why they make the dams. They
Yeah.
make it flow to certain areas.
So we look at like creeks. You know, I ride Tecolote Canyon every morning on my bike, and that's an incised water table. It's a deep gulch, and that's not the way streams are supposed to be. Streams are supposed to be sinuous and up near the surface, and the water's supposed to go into the land, and all the plants and animals can take care of it, right, and use it. And so if you look at a place where beavers are active, 85% of all the animals in that area are benefiting from that beaver's activity. So the beaver is what they call a keystone species. And if you take away the keystone, the whole bridge falls down, right? And that's the thing. The beaver is so important for holding the water on the land and keeping the other animals who are endangered, vital.
Do you think? Does that person that you said catches? Does she live close by? Maybe we can get her on the show sometime.
Love her. She lives in Denver. So
Denver.
my daughter and I flew there, and we started a movie with her. We'll have footage of her. Eventually, we interviewed her, and she gave us a training on how to do this, how to do safety for rescue.
So what's your group going to be called? Are you already have a name?
It's called Bravo. It's
Bravo.
Beaver Restoration, blah blah blah, vitalization.
I'll put the link. I'll get that later.
So anyway, so in Northern California, they're putting the beaver back on native land because the natives understand the importance of the beaver. It was their brother who was basically assassinated. So now they're putting them back on native land. And I think that's the first step. And then national forest is the next step. And after that, we'll start putting them everywhere. The big obstacle right now is California Department of Fish and Wildlife. It's the only one in 11 western states which is not allowing legal restoration.
Have they calculated at all at how much water runs into the ocean during a drought?
I think during a flood, because the water is still running at the same rate. It's going over the beaver dam now, but the water's not going anywhere. It's still running at the same flow rate. It's just during the flood times is when all the land and all the ponds fill up, and they just stay full all year.
Is there a downside to too many dams? Like if we brought in too many beavers, would that not cause problems as well?
So there's mitigation methods. So if the beaver dam starts to get too high and starts to flood, too many trees or too many property, they put in what they call a flow device. It's a beaver dam, a beaver deceiver. It's a tube.
Beaver deceiver.
It's a tube that goes above the dam and below the dam, and you have to surround it with a cage, and that keeps the level at a certain level. And then people go, well, they're going to chew all my favorite trees. Well, you can do things. You can put wire around the trees. You can paint sand on the trees, and then the beavers can't do that. They don't like chewing sand. And so there's ways of protecting your favorite ornamental tree, which would be the other big component.
Cool. Very cool.
But yeah, as far as downside, I mean, the upside is so huge. It's just like we broke this ecosystem, and we took away this keystone species, and the thing has been broken ever since, the middle 1800s. So England and Wales and Scotland have put beavers back up to 400 years of extinction there. So ours have only been gone for 170 or whatever. But other places in the world have found, the true message, which is put them back on the land, and all of a sudden the fish are coming back and all the wildlife's coming back. It's just like an amazing story over there.
So, did you? I read one. Actually, I heard it from a professor at the university. He said the Colorado River used to go before we took the water and used it for farmland and for people's lawns and swimming pools and all this stuff. The Colorado River used to flow all the way through most of Mexico. Did you guys know that?
Well, I know that the original route, the Salton Sea has filled and dried 3 times in the last 1,000 years. And the last time was due to human activity, right? They were digging tunnels or whatever and trying to put in irrigation, and also the dam broke. And so it actually filled the Salton Sea up with fresh water. Then little by little it got saltier and saltier, and now it's kind of a little bit of an environmental disaster because it got so salty that now the wild animals that fly through there end up catching botulism. We had a lot of birds that have died coming through there. So there's issues with water in California, and I mean more fresh water the better. And you could fill that. I mean, 200 feet below sea level, you could fill it from the Salton Sea if you put a pipe in from Mexico. But I think you're right. The Mexico is completely getting screwed at this point.
Yeah, because they used to get water, and
Fresh
they
water.
don't get any
Now they
water.
get nothing, right? They get like
We
one
take
off.
it all for swimming pools and washing their cars.
Well, I think it's mostly irrigation, Imperial Valley irrigation. Yeah, but so you look at, I was looking at like Palm Springs. So if you took like gray water from Palm Springs and you kind of purified it, you could actually use that as a way to fill all these other Indio, all those towns are kind of upstream of the Salton Sea. So if you had a couple of places to put fresh water in, you could help kind of balance the salt, and it would become like the vacation then. It wasn't just
So how long have you been getting into this beaver thing?
So I was studying global desertification. It turned out that global desertification, no matter how you look at it, it's human causes like overgrazing or people diverting water, whatever it is. So I think that's a huge issue, which you can definitely do something about. And that's where I came up with this. Here's one of the damn things. This is exactly what we need, right? And so you look at the Santa Margarita River, which is where these beavers are. It runs from Temecula down to Camp Pendleton, and it runs through the north part of Fallbrook to a big park. It's owned by the Wildlife Conservancy. And each year, some of these beaver go to Camp Pendleton where they end up getting exterminated. They illegally remove them because it's illegal to move beaver in California right now. So they're kind of stuck, but it's still kind of a screwed up situation. That, whatever 8 to 16 beavers a year end up getting killed at Camp Pendleton.
So if someone watching this wants to somehow get involved, if we put your contact and stuff, maybe they can get involved with what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that would be a way. So there's a Facebook page called Beavers of San Diego County.
Oh, wow.
So it's all about the latest and greatest down here. And I've got a lot of friends in Northern California. They're super. Every year, 2,000 beaver get killed in Northern California. So they're into rescuing beaver and putting them back in.
Why are they still killing beavers?
So the USDA has a subcategory called APHIS. So it's a federal program. APHIS is for nuisance animals. And so if people consider the beaver to be a nuisance for some reason, it's flooding their culvert, it's flooding their field, the first thing they do is go out and get a permit to kill them. It's easy to get a permit to kill them in California. It's simple, it's cheap, it's expedient. It's impossible to move beaver in California with the current laws unless you're a Native American. So that's the other way you can do it. You have to become a Native American. You got to get accepted into a tribe. And I know someone who's done that. So there is a route there to be able to legally move beaver if you are Native tribal, because they have sovereign rights. The tribes are federal, and so they are actually at a larger level, a higher level than the state level. They can supersede the state level, and so that's how they did it. And that's how Washington started. The Wallop tribe in Washington State started moving beaver, and everybody said, that's illegal, it's crazy. They did it anyway because they had the sovereign rights to. And it turned out all these fish came back, and wildlife came back. They're like, this is great. So now everybody in Washington State can move the beaver. The native, listen to the natives. They have the wisdom.
Yeah, they've lived on the land. They've lived in communion with animals. So I'm Seminole, either Seminole or Cherokee. They were forced to mix, but I eventually want to get connected with the tribes.
We need you in this program.
Yeah.
We need someone with I have to get my DNA checked. My dad.
Well, I don't believe my older brother did a DNA test and they didn't show any Native American. And what I think they're doing is it's 8 generations.
Yeah.
So they're washing it out because they don't want you to have an affiliation. That's my theory, because I know he's Native American and they said he's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, some people sent like to 2 different companies and got different results.
Yeah, I've seen that too. We're twins. Sent to 2 companies and got completely different results. So there's something going on there. Yeah. My friend thought I was 0.2% Afro Sub-Saharan African, but his wife turned out to be 2% Neanderthal. So she totally wiped him out.
So you guys have more things you want to ask about beavers or anything, or you guys want to go off onto a subject that we're first going to talk about, which is space?
We've got 1,000 questions. There's another beaver-like rodent called a
Nutria, yeah.
Nutria.
So that was brought in. That is an invasive species.
That is.
And so it was.
And they look like beavers, don't they?
They're more like muskrat, I think. Yeah,
They're muskrat.
but they're in the same category. But they are supposedly delicious, according to people I've talked to. So it might be a way to turn them into some food stores or something. But yeah, they are invasive and they dig a lot of holes in people's dams, and they're kind of a pest.
Were they originally
I don't know. I think that people have talked about feeding them to people in China. That people in China love them. So that may be a place they go to. I guess. I don't know. But I think they're kind of anti-beaver. They dig holes in dikes and dams, whereas beavers build them. So it's the reverse beaver.
Reverse beaver.
I read something similar about.
Combined with beaver creates energy.
I read something about Hawaii. Someone said that when the original settlers, which were Polynesian, came, they brought pigs, which destroyed a lot of the ecosystem in Hawaii. But
Yeah.
there's no, I mean, pig is just such a big part of the culture now. It's
Right.
But they have so many wild pigs that are destroying
Oh, yeah.
a lot of stuff.
Oh, we have the same thing going on in San Diego.
Oh, really? Pigs?
Oh my
Wild
god.
pigs?
Yes, really bad.
I was born in the year of the wild pigs. So.
Yeah, the barge.
They brought them in, I think, through the Russian River originally. The Russians brought them in, and that's where they started to spread. They're in every county in California now. They spread everywhere, and they sell more tickets, more permits to shoot than they do for deer now. So it's a huge, a money-making thing for the state.
Well, they breed them up too.
Totally, yeah. And
A
so
lot more.
there's people that their job is to eliminate these beavers in the Santa Cruz Mountains, but every year they leave a few because their job would be gone if they got rid of all of them. Right?
So can we segue to space exploration?
Unless
we have more
That's Eric's real specialty.
Yeah.
The two things are
So Eric has an organization. What's it called?
Greenlaunch.space.
Greenlaunch.space. Tell us all about that.
So Green Launch, so the first people that ever wanted to kind of shoot things into space was Jules Verne. And so he was a science fiction writer. He had this book called Earth to the Moon. It was a big cannon that was going to shoot people to the moon and investigate the moon back in the 1800s. Well, it was kind of a cool idea, but it turns out that ballistic launch is not a good thing for humans. But you can shoot a lot of things into space with ballistic launch. And the current world record was set with gunpowder in 1966 is 110 miles. So somebody took a cannon that was 110 feet long with gunpowder in it. They shot a projectile 110 miles up in the air. So that's the world record. It's been standing ever since 1966, and that was set by a guy named Dr. Gerald Bull, who was eventually assassinated by the Mossad. So because he kind of got screwed. He was working with the United States government on ballistics, and the best howitzer today is one of his inventions. And then for some reason he got kind of crosswise with our Air Force or whoever he was working with. And so they stopped paying him here. And then our CIA set him up to work with South Africa. But at the time there was an embargo against South Africa. And so then our Commerce Department busted him. So then he did 6 months in prison, came out super pissed. And so then he went to work. Then he went to work with Saddam, which was the mistake, I think, that kind of ended his life. So then the Mossad said to him, don't help Saddam, because the person who's going to shoot is FLiBe, that's where we live. We don't want you to do that. And he said, F you. And they said, okay. And one day on the porch in 1989, they put a lot of holes in it. So that was the end of Gerald Bull. And that was the end of ballistic launch in this modern era. And so then I'm working with a guy named Dr. John Hunter. And so he was working at Livermore Labs. He developed a super fast hydrogen cannon. So hydrogen is the fastest gas in the universe, the fastest propellant that there is. Faster than gunpowder, faster than
Or that we humans know about.
that we as humans in our particular elements that we know, the fastest propellant is hot hydrogen. So that's what we're going to use for our particular method of eco. So we've got this cannon, 55 feet long, it's a 7-inch barrel, 7-inch ID, so the barrel hole size, and we're going to shoot up to about 60 kilometers. We have for them. So that's our next shot. And,
Where's this launch going to be, and are we invited?
so it's on a Army base. You have to have clearance. You need clearance to go down there. So you can't unless you get. It helps being a U.S. citizen. So the Canadians on it most. So if you're American, and we can give you a little heads up, we might be able to get you. Very cool. Yeah. So anyway,
What base are they going to shoot it with?
So Human Proving Ground is an active ballistic.
Oh, Human
Proving Ground. So they shoot all the time there, and they just have to put a little, give us a vacation. A little gap in the schedule we can be there, because otherwise they're shooting over us. We can't be there when they're shooting over us.
And so your goal would somehow be to get people out.
Well, so 90% of the stuff that goes into space can be shot with a cannon. It's like electronics, or water, fluid, and fuel. And so you can't shoot people with a cannon. You would kill them. But everything else you can. So we're not greedy. We only want to shoot 90% of it. Everybody else can take the other 10%.
Like shooting satellites and
Yeah, so the first thing we do shooting is mini satellites. So there's an issue called Eyes in the Sky that DARPA's interested in. They want to be able to see like what's happening over Rhodesia yesterday, or what do they call it now, Mozambique. And so if you wanted to move a satellite, it takes like 3 months to move a satellite from here to there to see what's happening over there. Well, we could just shoot this small satellites up tomorrow in a little cluster satellite like a constellation. They look down, play what you want to know, then they would deorbit and burn up.
And what kind of, in theory, could you send supplies to things like the space station?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Absolutely.
So what Elon is planning to do is he's planning to launch his rocket without the fuel in it, just enough to get to orbit, and then he's going to fuel it from there. Because if you try to shoot it from the ground all full of fuel, you can never get off because it's just too heavy, right? So he's going to merge in transit and fuel with 4 other ships coming up with the fuel in it, and then go to Mars from there. But we can
Mars?
So he's going to go, I think, unmanned to Mars in 2022, and then I think manned mission possibly is in 2024. He's good to go.
People really want to do that, huh?
Oh yeah.
Dude, I saw the signatures for that. It's crazy. People are genuinely signing up to go up there.
Oh yeah, and they're going one way. People won't stay.
What are the
right?
for like carbon footprint? I mean, how much carbon fuel do they use to get a rocket
Okay.
in space
So
compared
the
to?
comparative. So with us, this is hydrogen. So all we produce is water. When we shoot, all we're making is water. Hydrogen plus oxygen, a big bank of water. With Elon, he's using methalox. I think this is his final goal. So methalox is methane and oxygen, and you actually produce 19 tons of CO2 every time you shoot 1 ton into orbit with that kind of fuel. So it is, if you're looking at, if you think CO2 is horrible, and you think CO2 is going to kill the planet, then maybe you want to go with greenhouse, which is why we're all green launch.
Okay. What do you think? Do you think it's that much extra?
Well, more than half things live on the planet are plants, and they love all this CO2. They do that too much. They're happy. We're making extra CO2. So you get below 150 parts of CO2, plants start dying. They need that CO2, right? So then people think, oh, it's 360 where we ought to be, where it's 420 or whatever we are now. So the plants are happy, and everybody used to be CO2 at one point in their life, a long time.
So, do you guys? My theory is that Mars probably was inhabited before Earth. But that's a whole lot.
No, I completely agree. There's something called spermia, which is
Wait. Earth was inhabited before.
Mars.
Oh, Mars.
Mars was inhabited before Earth.
Yeah, because
aren't they finding entrants of bacteria?
because Mars cooled before Earth did, so
Yeah.
it became habitable earlier. And there's been, I think it's transferring. It's where you hit a planet and a bunch of stuff blows off. And a lot of times things that blow off Mars end up here, and they find it in Antarctica or whatever. And they have found fossils of things which look to be organic that came from Mars. So Mars could have seeded Earth with some kind of primitive thing, which we all then became descended from. But we could all be Martians.
I have a question. What do you know about external files?
Well, I mean, you go to any place and there's life, right? The vents at the bottom of the ocean. Those hydro vents down in Yellowstone. The Old Faithful. Every place you go, it's hot or it's cold or it's high pressure, as nasty as it can be. There's life there. So I think it's certainly possible that there's life, probably not on the surface of Mars, but underneath the protective layer of the top of it. You think of our planet. You go to the bottom of these caves. There's life down there. It's life everywhere.
Yeah, way down at the bottom of the Mariana Trench is probably weird.
Yeah, they have those volcanic vents, right?
Yeah.
Sulfur vents. There's a whole life form that's built around sulfur chemistry instead of carbon chemistry.
Would you like to go out to space if you were able to go out to space?
I mean, it's going to be a possibility. It looks like here's Elon putting all kinds of people in space, right? I mean, you just shot Captain Kirk into space.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Well, I didn't even see that, man. I've been so busy looking at that.
But the got to shoot Sulu now because Sulu and Captain Kirk have been kind of battling over the last couple of decades. So it's time to put Sulu up there, I guess. So it doesn't feel like he's being abused.
Yeah. I haven't really been following much of what Elon Musk. Last thing I heard is the Boring Company was going to send hopefully cars from San Francisco to Los Angeles in like a few seconds or whatever.
Yeah. So that's a cool idea, and he's done it. Like he's done a mile trench, I think, in Hawthorne, California. But the big project is going to be in Vegas. They're going to do it somewhere in Vegas first, the first big version of it. But yeah, eventually with a tube, which could be above land over most of the distance, and then tunnels for the final couple of miles, and you're getting close to the concentrated part of the city. But yeah, that's super fast. It's fast as an airplane, and using it as good as you can.
Yeah.
Those trains that travel at 250 miles an hour, this would be even faster than a train because it's moving back to the tube. You don't even have the air friction anymore.
Like those the tubes they put in the shooting in the bank, right?
Yeah. Big clear tube with a bunch of people flying down into the cars in Japan, the Shinkansen goes every 13 minutes or something.
Yes.
All the time. So,
But what happens to the people who play the car if you go that fast?
Well, that's what when they first started making cars and started making speed, they were thinking like our body was going to fall apart or something. They thought that. But then once you start going fast, your whole system moves at the same. I don't know.
yeah, I mean,
That's
there's a certain
kind of
amount of
the
G.
dynamics to it.
It depends how fast you're accelerating. You're going to experience a certain amount of G force, right? But humans can withstand, I don't know, up to 8 or 9 G comfortably, I think. And then beyond that, you can live, but it gets more and more uncomfortable. You get more back and you can't breathe. And, you guys put special bladders on your legs to push the blood back into your head. Once you pass out.
So how long has this project you've been working on? You've been doing that.
So relaunch. So like I said, so John Hunter developed a sharp gun which shot Mach 9 in the 90s. But he never got to go vertically with it. So he's 25 years now. He's been wanting to go vertical, and so finally this is kind of his dream come true. So relaunch has been around for about 3 years, and so we've gone from nothing, an empty tube, to a fully functioning vertical launch system in 3 years. We made a lot of progress.
You want to segue to a little bit about you took the vaccine? You took one, two?
I had both.
Oh, okay. Have you guys? Any of you guys done? You've done vaccines?
I'm vaccinated.
You too? All of you guys?
No.
Wow. I'm the only one. I'm a
Thank
minority.
you.
But I had the pandemic, so
You had this.
You're 7 times better than we are, right?
yeah, I'm supposed to be
Quit bragging.
better immunity towards the thing because they're supposed to wear off now after 6 months or something.
They said you're gonna have
Originally,
to
they
do
never
stories.
told anyone that.
Before we launch into virus land, I did have a few
Oh, okay.
questions
Okay,
about
good.
hydrogen. Now you're talking about using it as a gas to launch projectiles into space. What about as an energy source?
Well, yeah, I mean, hydrogen is great. It's it's hard to turn something into hydrogen. You need energy to do that. And then hydrogen itself has got to be contained. And it's a sneaky little molecule. It can sneak through a lot of different, small orifices. It's the tiniest, sneakiest molecule there is. So, so there are issues with, how you're going to transport it. How are you going to store it? But I think those can all be overcome. Just right now, the infrastructure is built for gasoline, ethanol.
I understand it takes, hydrogen is great as a fuel, but it takes more energy to create it than it expends.
Yeah.
So in theory, after they overcome these obstacles, could it be a clean energy?
Oh yeah. So look at who are the two countries that are completely green? I think Costa Rica and Iceland. Well, Iceland now they're taking all their geothermal and all their hydropower and they're making hydrogen, and then they use that to run their ships and their cars.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
So in other words, it's energy that isn't being used anyway,
Right.
and they use it to create hydrogen.
Yeah, the excess energy that's all clean anyway, and they turn it into clean energy, which is a transportable fuel, because you can't transport dams and hydro.
And hydrogen-fueled cars exist now.
Oh yeah. I think if you check on Iceland, the ships are what they did first, and I think they're moving to cars now.
Running on hydrogen.
Yeah. It's like the future. And then the other one was I think Costa Rica also because they have so many hydropower. They're really super green country. When you look at the countries with the lowest carbon footprint, one of the biggest industrialized company is France. And how'd they do it? Nukes. They did it with nuclear power, with old-fashioned fission. And so that's the way to get off. That's the way to get off fossil fuels. They did it 1970 to 1990. They got off fossil fuels, and so that's in Sweden and France. Look at those guys. Their carbon footprint is the lowest in any industrialized country.
But then what do they do with all that waste from the power furnace?
They vitrify it. They just put it like these big blocks. But you can recycle. So now we're going to get into this next thing. Which is
I know, this is what I'm excited No, just from the layman's terms, here is a nuclear reactor that creates very little nuclear waste. And in fact, one of the biggest benefits
Is this the cold fusion?
No, this is
liquid salt.
molten salt.
Molten salt.
Oh, okay.
And so, for example, Onofre, my son just came back from Chernobyl. Blocks and blocks and blocks of radioactive fuel that's just radioactive waste. These molten salt reactor can run on these and eat it all. And all the meltdowns you've ever heard of, these don't melt down. They can't melt down. You can turn them off and go home. The ones that I personally think is one of the biggest obstacles we have. Nuclear power has such a bad reputation.
Yeah.
People can't get their heads around that there is actually safe nuclear. And I just wanted to touch on Eric once told me the 4 things that cheap energy solves. I know hunger's one of them. What were the?
Well, I think that hunger is anytime you have lower energy costs, you increase the standard of living for people around the world. And for a lot of people, it's a pretty they're on the edge, right? They're starving because they don't have cheap enough energy to desalinate their water or grow crops or whatever, get medical care. So as you decrease the cost of energy, everybody in the whole world benefits from it. And so if you can get super clean energy, which this is clean, it's nuclear power, it doesn't create any CO2 at all, that you could actually pull all these people out of poverty. You can desalinate water, you can make what they call green fuels. You take CO2 out of the air, you turn it into a fuel, you burn it, it just puts CO2 back in the air. So it's net zero as far as the amount of CO2 it's producing. It's the same amount you're consuming. So yeah, this reactor ran successfully from 1966 to 1969 at Oak Ridge National Labs in Tennessee. It ran great. They turned it off on the weekend. Interesting. They turned it off on the weekend, turned it back on Monday morning. And so you don't have all these problems with long-lived spent fuel. The spent fuel that comes out of this has got like a 100-year half-life versus 10,000 years. So it burns up all the long-lived radioactive waste. And you can actually use the waste from this reactor to start other reactors because you need a source of neutrons to make thorium work. The thorium itself is less radioactive than a banana. It's the same radioactivity as a granite countertop. But if you hit it with a neutron, it turns to uranium-233, which then fissions and makes energy, right? So we are the Saudi Arabia of thorium. We have more than any country in the world except India. And right now, India and China both have thorium reactors that are based somewhat on the one we had in Oak Ridge. The one in, I think it's only a 2-kilowatt reactor that China has running now. It's out in the desert somewhere, like near Mongolia or something. But they've got one running. And the people in India, because they don't have uranium, they have a lot of thorium, they want to run their reactors off thorium also. So yeah, there's 4 times as much thorium as there is any uranium, and the uranium that we have is only 0.7%. 235 is what we need to run reactors with. 238, something like that. Use isotope separation to pull out the whole uranium we can't use. So anyway, it cures everything. There's enough thorium for 10,000 years. There's no such thing as, like the end of global fuels, the end of lithium, or the end of oil, or whatever it is. There's no such thing as the end of thorium. There's so much of it, and it's on the moon and Mars too. So when you go there, we can still use the fuel.
Why don't we hear about that? I've never heard about that in my entire life.
So if you go onto thorium on the internet, you're going to find this guy Gordon McDonald. He did about 1 billion.
Yeah, McDonald.
He's a Canadian.
Everywhere.
But yeah, he's done all kinds of videos on it, and he's yeah, it's a great source of power. It could last forever.
Wait, back up. You invented a fitting for a thorium reactor.
Well, the fitting I have is used in a lot of places, but it could be used in a thorium reactor. The only nuclear application I have now is NIST, which is the fusion reactor at Beaver Blues.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I understand why it is not more popular. Is right when they were deciding whether thorium-based reactors were an option. Is there is no weapons grade byproduct, and all these countries said, "Whoa, we want our hands on this."
Yeah, I think that as much as anything, it was Nixon was the president, and there was something called fast fusion, which never turned out to work. But they took the money away from thorium molten salt reactors. They went to this fusion reactor, and the fusion reactor didn't work. And the reason they were giving Nixon wanted to give it to California to get California jobs. It was a completely political move, and it never worked out. So, but then they turned off the molten salt reactors. And so molten salt reactors are not picky eaters. They'll eat anything. They'll eat fuel, they'll eat thorium, they'll eat uranium, they'll eat plutonium. So they can be run on pretty much anything that's nuclear and current nuclear fuel. And so yeah, it's a great reactor. It's super safe. It can't blow up because it's not pressurized. It can't melt down. It's already liquid. So like I said, other countries, India and China, have huge programs. And they're the biggest country in the world, so if they get it, it'll make a big difference. If they keep going with coal, we're all going to suffer.
We have a lot of people in China. So what he said earlier, Japan was, because I lived there, they had 120 something nuclear reactors, and it's the size of California. We only have a couple in
they turn them off.
They turned that off. We had like three different locations, but can you imagine 100 and something different locations?
Yeah.
And I read that they were pretty much duped into thinking it was cheap and safe, but it was actually the reason it was cheap for them is because we were financing it so that we can get back the byproduct, which no one ever really realized. That's what the reason we pushed all those nuclear power plants is to get the byproduct so we can make nuclear weapons. We couldn't convince the American people to put all the reactors in our country.
Yeah. So these reactors make plutonium, which you need for hydrogen bombs, and they make uranium. So you can get the uranium just from centrifuges, which is what countries around the world are trying to do nowadays. Nuclear powered, like Iran.
Yeah. Aren't a lot of these plants old, running on old technology? And even new nuclear plants wouldn't be running into the problem.
Yeah, so that's, I think, the way that France did it. Like I said, France got off fossil fuels in 20 years. It was really with fission reactors. So they each one the same. They all were trained the same. They all upgraded at the same time. And so anybody could work in any of them. In the U.S., we gave it to the cheapest bidder. In the case of brain surgery, in the case of nuclear power, you might want to keep them all the
even
same.
tattoo artists.
I'll do it cheaper.
So I think that was part of the problem, was that we have all kinds of different types of systems to run it, and it's just we haven't really had that many nuclear accidents. We've had 3 Mile Island, and we've had that's pretty much it in the U.S. Right? A couple of small reactors that blew up, but very few fatalities compared to coal mining and all the other things that go on with other types of fuel that are out there.
On this subject, I have just another question that's kind of near and dear to us. There's a lot of talk about what went wrong at San Onofre and how do we fix it.
So San Onofre, they just upgraded the reactors there, but they had a leak, and I think that part of the problem was that whoever, I think it was Mitsubishi or whoever did the reactor upgrade, didn't read the prints right or something was missed.
Or was the cheapest bidder?
But anyway, they had a leak. I think that was part of the problem. And people were already opposed to nuclear for a lot of other reasons. Just history. We've had a lot of people anti-nuke, and they make the nuclear power equivalent with nuclear bombs. They both use uranium, but there's not a lot of similarities here. But there's Mothers Against Nuclear, which is an organization of women who work at the Diablo Canyon plant, and they want to keep it open because greenest energy we have in California at the moment. I mean, solar and wind, they're intermittent. They're diffuse. You're going to have to always have some kind of fossil fuel backing them up, you know?
And what about all the, I know we're really emphasizing solar and wind. Isn't there a lot of bad products in creating, a lot of obstacles that
Oh, yeah.
don't make solar and wind the silver bullet of
Yeah,
environmentally friendly energy?
Yeah, so because they're diffuse, which means they're not super powerful, and they're intermittent because they're only on a third of the time, that you've got to have always have to have a backup. But you're right. In order to make solar panels, you got to do a lot of mining, strip mining or whatever around the world. There's all kinds of elements that go into them. And they're only good for whatever 25, 30 years, and you got to recycle them. You've got a whole lot of issues with long-term solar and wind power. And there's a book out called The Roadmap to Nowhere, and it actually examines the roadmap we have.
I love that song.
So it's the roadmap to recycle renewable energy that we are on right now. It doesn't get there. You can't get there. It's just not possible from a financial or environmental or limited element standpoint to actually go that route. And there's people that explain that very concisely on the internet. You can look that up. But only if you have something like nuclear can you actually make the green revolution happen or whatever you want to have happen without completely degrading people's quality of life.
What about? I've just heard interviews and I've read certain things, but I'm not like expert in any of this. Just I hear here and there, but there should be other energy sources that maybe the government's not allowing us to know about that. They captured from crashed alien spaceships.
Yeah, I mean,
you know how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all about what's that one? What's the one that's out there in New Mexico?
Yeah,
I love that one.
Area 53. They
supposedly picked those things up, but I don't know. I mean, fission is here now. It's easy. It's doable. It's been shown to work. I mean, eventually you're going to have fusion, which is what happens in the sun, but it's always 20, 30 years away. This stuff you can do it now. You start building 1,000 of these plants a year, which you could do, like you build ships. You could build these nuclear reactors kind of in a shipbuilding process, like a company called ThorCon in Florida is doing. And you could build 1,000 a year. In 30 years, we'd be completely off fossil fuel.
Can you just explain once again why can these things not have the traditional problems with nuclear power plants melting down?
Right.
And the byproduct of having the waste.
Yeah. So regular nuclear reactors we have now, called light water reactors, are cooled by water. In order to make water hot, you've got to put it under pressure. So you've got hot pressurized water being used to take the heat from the reactor into where the heat exchanger is happening and the generator is happening, right? So that's this loop. And so the big dome that you have up here at San Onofre is to contain that steam.
Hot water under pressure.
Right, which
is kind of a recipe for disaster.
If it broke, it would flash the steam, and that dome would supposedly contain it. But it probably wouldn't work that well, and obviously we had big issues with
Went to the cheapest bidder.
Fukushima and Chernobyl, where it didn't really contain it, right? So things do happen. When things melt down, you get a big explosion of pressure. Well, the molten salt reactor actually operates at regular pressure, at atmospheric pressure. If you get a leak in it, it leaks onto the ground and turns back into a solid salt. So the contamination is square feet, not cubic miles that you're going to contaminate. And then as far as the waste product, there's the two bottom rows in the Kirk chart. You got this big kind of H-shaped chart, and then you got these two rows at the bottom. Those are the lanthanide and the actinide. And those are the parts of nuclear reactions that take a long time to break down into a long life nuclear waste. And so those things in a molten salt reactor, it just keeps on burning them. It burns them all up until they're gone. Whereas with regular reactors, you have to take the fuel out after 3 months because the cladding on the fuel rods is cracked. So the fuel is still there. It only burns 0.7% of all the energy. So 99.3% of the energy is still in those. That's why there's so much. That's why they last so long in these spent fuel casks after after they've been taken out of the reaction. It's not, the fuel isn't burned up, it's just the cladding cracked. That's why we have to take them out every 3 months and swap out, a third of the rods every 3 months. And the molten salt reactor, you just keep dumping fuel in it. You can fuel it while it's running. And you can take out, and there's actually the byproducts that come out of it are great. There's something called plutonium-238. So that's what's running those rovers on Mars. The Perseverance and the Curiosity rover are both running on plutonium-238. And we're out of it. We're going to spend millions of dollars a kilogram to make this stuff. And this reactor just makes it in its spare time. It's one of the waste products that comes out of it. The other thing it makes is bismuth-213, which is medical isotope. So this reactor, the waste is actually worth millions of dollars a kilogram. So it's you could actually run this thing, even if it didn't produce energy, you could run it and just make enough money off these byproducts to support the whole project.
So it's not hot water under pressure, and it uses almost all the fuel.
Exactly.
And the waste can be used in other.
A lot of the waste can be separated out and used for other useful purposes that are actually in demand.
And once again, what are the biggest obstacles? Why haven't we heard about it? Why is it not more of a thing?
So I go to these nuclear molten salt reactor thorium conferences, and it's a bunch of there's a few young people there, but mostly it's old white guys who are familiar with this back in the day when it ran. And so these guys are old people now, right? So it's it's a marketing, it's a publicity, it's a political issue. It's not really a physics issue. The physics is really pretty much it's figured out. They actually ran this thing, like I said, for 5 years. It ran for 20,000 hours. It ran great. The guys loved it. You can see them online. These guys, Sid Paul, and if you look at them, they're like, this was awesome. We loved it. It was great. I can't believe they turned it on. Cool. It's a cool project. But yeah, there are some young people who are getting involved in it. But like I said, it's probably going to happen in India and China, and eventually we'll be buying our reactors from them or something. Your grandparents, your parents tax money paid for this, and you're not getting it. You should be getting it.
We are. Just about everything.
So what do you think the Biden administration is doing anything positive for environmental stuff?
Well, so they joined the Paris Peace Accord, which is like gives everybody like a goal to not burn any CO2. It doesn't give you any way of getting to that goal. I mean, you really got to have people. People hated Trump or whatever, but
They gave us the road to nowhere.
They were funding my friend who was doing research at Hanford and how to make these molten salt reactors work. So they were actually on a path to getting a solution, which I'm not sure how that funding is going. I have to know that. I'll try to find out. But yeah, through the Department of Energy.
So what can people do to learn more or to get involved with this, or to someone listening?
So yeah, the Thorium Alliance is a good TEA. The Thorium Energy Alliance is a good place to start. They're cool people. They've done a lot of things, and you can find out about it. So Bill Gates is working on it with a company called TerraPower.
He scares me.
In Bellevue, Washington. So Terrestrial Energy is a Canadian company that's working on it. So my friends work for that company. And then ThorCon is in Florida. They're building a reactor, probably in Indonesia, because our nuclear regulatory commission is all geared for light water reactors. They haven't really figured out there's a big difference, and you don't need to do all this crazy stuff with these molten salt reactors because they don't have the same problem.
And can't you make these things much smaller?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And then in theory, you have some starving little African town that build one of these and have clean energy.
Yeah, I mean,
that's not a danger to anyone.
Like some small island, like Guam or whatever, could get one of these. So yeah, they could build them like an assembly line, like an aircraft. You could build 1 or 2 a day on an assembly line because you don't need this huge pressure vessel anymore because it's not pressurized. And you could have something that would fit inside of a railroad car, which would be great. You could have it portable. It'd be great to have it for adventure somewhere.
So how much energy can one of these molten salt reactors that fits in a railroad car supply?
I think you could do a small town with that, and if you get a lot closer to where you actually need to use it, like a lot of our power is just wasted. All these lines trying to get it from far away to town where we're going to use it, whatever. lose a lot of power.
Since we have you, what about superconductors? Cables that can, but before they could only conduct electricity like 5 million degrees below zero, some ridiculously low temperature.
Yeah, it's super cool.
So much energy gets wasted sending the energy from point A to point B.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that would be used to conduct energy. So the power that we get in Los Angeles, we get a lot of power from Utah. It's called high density direct current. It's on the power line that starts in this little town called Delta, Utah, and it goes to Los Angeles. It's only got one on ramp and one off ramp, and this huge power line. So they sell $1 billion worth of power from Utah, which was burning coal up until recently, to Los Angeles. And now they're switching over to natural gas. So still a lot of CO2 coming out of there. It's about half what it used to be. But if they could go to nuclear, if you could classify nuclear as renewable, then it would have all this funding. That would be a huge step forward. Because then if people could use it, people would fund it, and it would just be in demand, and people would start using it. People would start cranking it up.
So one of the biggest obstacles is to have this nuclear power classified as renewable.
Exactly. Some states do. I think Ohio does, but not in California. We're on a path to nowhere here. but certain lobbies are huge in California. You know, solar, wind people. They're making all kinds of money. But yeah, it's never gonna get us where we want to go.
So about I don't know, like 10 years ago, I started watching YouTube videos on some guy who was making. He had these little gas. You throw your waste in it, and he was making this ethanol, and you would put it in your car. This was a while ago.
Yeah, it's called syngas, I think. Yeah. So that's one of the things about molten salt reactors is they create a lot of heat. They're running hot. So instead of running at like high pressure water goes into 400 degrees, well, that's great. Well, this thing runs at like 700 degrees all day long anyway. Well, at those temperatures, you can do a lot of things. You can take all this garbage. You can heat it to those temperatures. You can create the gas coming off of it and make fuel out of it. It's called syngas. Basically, it's something that could burn. And then you can also turn, so you can do huge desalination plants, which is much cheaper than trying to buy water from the farmers in the Central Valley, because the heat is so cheap coming off it. That's the main problem with desalination now is you're paying for all this energy from the fossil fuels to boil the water, right, to heat it up. So the other thing you can do is you can actually make synthetic fuels. Like I said, these are zero carbon fuels like diethyl ether, things that are a replacement for diesel, things that could be used for the airplane fuel, which you're still going to need anyway.
So this is just a totally off the subject thing when you said airplane fuel. Do you think that two twin towers really got knocked down with airplane fuel?
I mean, you look at.
I think that's the stupidest conspiracy theory the whole government gave us in this whole book of lies.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at building number 7.
And then number 7, how can you? Yeah. Maybe this is gonna get us shut down again.
Yeah, I know.
Going on this subject, but I YouTube recently, it had so many good videos on 9/11, and then all of a sudden, like, there's almost no videos anymore, except ones that are trying to dispute all the people that disputed the official, stupid theory. And all those new videos, they just don't mention building number 7. It's like 47-story building. The top floor was Mayor Giuliani's evacuation center, command center for FEMA.
Right.
Below that was the SEC offices, which housed all the Enron case, which was the biggest news thing until 9/11, and all of a sudden you didn't hear about Enron anymore.
And the basement was full of gold.
And the base, that was actually building 1 and 2 had Saudi gold, and it all disappeared. Like, where did all their gold go?
Yeah, it didn't melt.
Okay, enlighten me. What is tower number 7?
Okay, so building 1 and 2 fell, and then tower 7, which is way far away, it's a 47-story building. It had a little bit of fires going on. And then all of a sudden, they announced it on the news that it fell. And as they were announcing on the news, it happened to be behind the lady. And they went, they cut it out. And they're like, oh, what happened to building number 7? And they later it fell. So they announced it on the news before it happened. The lady who's announcing it, it was behind her.
In the picture, yeah.
And she's going, so this 47-story tower, it had the CIA offices there, it had FBI offices there, it had Mayor Giuliani's FEMA center there, and it was brand new. His whole bunker for if there was a big disaster, that's where you would go to control the whole city. Number 7, that tower, 47-story building. And then it had all these other offices of top government officials. This whole building was just like super high
But
tech.
it did fall.
It fell at free fall speed, and there's videos of it falling. And they announced it on the news before it fell. And then the building owner of Tower 1 and 2 was also the building owner of number 7, and he took out 3 policies, Larry Silverstein, 3 policies on one on each building for a terrorist attack, like a year or 2 before 9/11. So he actually got paid 3 times for this happening, for 3 buildings. And every time they talk about the terrorist attack, they never talk about this huge building. 47-story tower just falls. And every theory they give for why 1 and 2 fell, they don't even mention those don't apply to 7 because there was no playing field. There was no idiot playing field there.
Yeah.
So how can you have a 47-story building just fall at free? And he announced it. He said on the news, Larry Silverstein, he said, we had so much material loss of life that we decided to pull it. And everyone knows who's in demolition what pull it means. It means you planned this ahead of time. You had to put explosives, and to pull it means you bring it down. So that's just there's no way any theory of what happened on 9/11 could be looked at unless you look at that. That's a smoking gun, and then they just how they look at it is they just pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, you
So
can
no
see, it's amazing because there's this small asymmetric furniture fire, right? So if he was going to fall, you figure that part might fall down. But the whole thing, you see like squibs, right? Little explosions going out, and the thing, it does fall at free fall speed. And the only way that can happen is if all the bottom supports are gone simultaneously. And if you talk to any demolition guy about that building falling, like, dude, that building got demolished.
So the theory is the United States government blew up these buildings so they could start a war.
Yeah, because they had those wars planned out. They published it in a book. I actually started to read the book before 9/11. It was in my library at Soviet University. The book was called The Grand Chessboard. It was written by Zubino Brzezinski, which used to be, he was involved in so many war preparations. And it talked about we need to destroy all these 7 different countries. And the only way we can have it happen is if we have a similar event to Pearl Harbor. And the next day, right after 9/11, they said, this is the new Pearl Harbor. That's like they had the script all planned out. All the countries that they attacked over the last 12 to 20 years were all the countries that were named in that book that were going to be attacked. And how did they all do the next day? Oh, it's all believed to be linked to Al-Qaeda. What does Al-Qaeda mean? It means the list. It's all the people that used to work for the government that are now blacklisted for working for the government was what Al-Qaida originally meant. It was a CIA created name for people they didn't like. So it's like anyone could say, I'm Al-Qaeda, but you don't know who's Al-Qaeda. You know, groups start, because that's what the government's against. Oh, I want to be that group. I'm Al-Qaeda.
There's a local 9/11 truth group, and they're really good. A couple of guys were, accident investigators for the military, so they know what they're talking about. And they're like, dude, this thing went down like on a brick. It went down so fast.
And the crazy thing is, if you look at how the planes crashed, it's as if Mayor Giuliani's office was the command center for remote control, flying those planes into the building. And the 3rd plane was supposed to hit that building, but it got shot down. They said it was brought down by people. It was incinerated, so it had to be shot down.
Well, that's the whole thing with that. That Pennsylvania airplane.
They couldn't find anything.
There was never, you'd see the suitcases, fingers, whatever, something laying on the ground. He goes, this isn't a crash scene. This is nothing. The local, whatever he was, medical investigator. This is not a crash scene. He went home.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, right before September 11th, the place that supposedly a plane hit, which only made a circle until the building fell, was supposed to be a jet hitting the Pentagon. That's the very office that they announced the day before 9/11 that they're missing how many billions of dollars from the Pentagon budget. The day before 9/11, they announced it. Cheney announced it, I think.
Yeah, so that's what we call loose change.
Yeah, loose change is great. But there were so many great videos before, and loose change is still up, which is good.
Yeah.
But all these ones are just so stupid now, and and I keep going like, why don't you talk about building number 7? If you talk about building number 7, all your other theories make no sense.
Yeah, that NIST part was completely.
And yeah, they just completely no. We only talking about the 2 towers. That's all people know. Oh, okay. You don't know about another building that fell the same day? So that's why in my song, Believe the Building Fell Qaeda, it says, 3 buildings fell from 2 planes, they said, believe the building fell Qaeda. And I got that one on YouTube, no longer monetized recently. Yeah, so maybe this is all going to be shut down. We went off on a tangent, but I just thought you would know,
Yeah, what does
you
this
would
have
know
to do with
something.
renewable power?
Well, it's a big, it's a huge conspiracy, obviously.
Yeah, the whole government just fucked us over with 20 years of lies and wars that had nothing to do with any of the things they said it had to do with.
Yeah, so we're paying their
We're
salaries.
paying all the money to.
How would you deal with an employee when you were paying their salary and they're lying to you all the time? How would you deal with that? You fire them. You fire our government.
Yeah, we didn't fire the whole wall. So we went off on a tangent, but do we want to go back to the same thing, or do we want to talk about a different subject, or should we end this?
No, I would like to just talk about whales for a minute.
Let's talk about whales.
Whale.
So the biggest predator on the planet is the sperm whale. It's a 50-foot long, toothed whale that eats squid. It eats huge squid at the bottom of the ocean. So this whale goes into like a dream state. It floats down a mile deep. It battles a huge squid. It eats it. It goes to the surface and defecates. That is another huge keystone species. So what did we do when we killed all these whales? Well, too bad, whales are dead. Well, we broke this thing called the iron nitrogen pump. So when a whale eats the bottom of the ocean and then moves to the surface, it brings all the iron and nitrogen up, right? And that's where the plankton can get to it. The photoplankton. So they're like, this is awesome. Look at all this poop and this nitrogen. So they start eating that iron and the nitrogen. And they create a huge algae bloom. And then the krill go, oh, this is awesome. Let's eat all these phytoplankton, right? So then the krill is the bottom of the entire ocean food pyramid. And so if you had a food pyramid and the bottom became 1/10 the size it used to be previously, the whole pyramid shrinks. That's what happened when we killed all the whales. We wrecked the food pyramid. So now we killed.
Why did we kill the whales?
Well, they killed sperm whales. They killed for the sperm and egg, which was used for fuel.
Oh, okay.
And so
Liver?
So nuclear power would save this one also. It would save the whales and trees. And so anyway, so it was 1.2 million sperm whales got shot down to like 100, tenth the size, 100, maybe 100,000. And so now it's coming back. I think it's 300,000 or 400,000 now. So it's coming back. But that's the thing. How to get the whales going again, because that takes. There's 30 times more CO2 in the ocean than there is in the atmosphere. So if you can fix the ocean and have something that sucks up all the CO2 there, you can solve all these problems with, global warming if that's what the problem is. So anyway, these whales are awesome, and you got to check them out. They're like, they're like the key to solving global warming. I think you just need to get more whale poop. Whale poop is the gold of the ocean.
Do you think just sperm whales is what we should focus on?
Well, I mean, sperm whales are the ones that do the diving. All whales do produce poop, which is great for the ocean. So
they're the deep divers, right?
Don't we have upwelling anyway?
You do get upwelling, but you don't get upwelling of digested squid, which is what the whales are doing. Yeah, I was thinking maybe great to come up with a way of turning the synthetic whale poop. Each time a ship comes
There
in
you go.
oil.
As soon as we said 9/11, we got cut off of Instagram.
Are you joking?
Well, either that or we went to the time limit. So I still don't know why Instagram cut me off, and that's why I got cut off of Facebook. And it might have been because I did longer than hour videos. But they didn't tell me why, so I don't know why. So I'm trying to figure out. But it automatically stopped on Instagram, so we must have went an hour. That's really weird. I'm gonna.
Is that the main thing that the sperm whales eat? Is just mainly those giant squid?
Those giant squid, yeah. I mean, they come up
That's
like
it?
battle scars.
Right.
That's their favorite food, yeah.
Yeah, the big suction
No,
cup.
I've seen a lot of the pictures. So.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah.
But how does the squid population keep up with the whale population?
Well, see, I think that
They're so
Oh, the
deep.
whole cycle would continue.
so this lady,
There'd be more food for the squid.
yeah, because everything else is dumping down to what they're going to eat. All the stuff that falls from everybody else pooping and eating and doing all the things they do on the upper layer of the ocean. So yeah, there's a huge pile of blue whales that were living near Sri Lanka, and this this woman, Asha DeVos, was doing videos like, why are these very big blue whales living here? And I go, give me a call, I'll tell you why. She texts me. And I said, because there's sperm whales living there, they're creating this huge plankton bloom. And that's what the blue whales eat. One of them eating it's like a food counter for them right there. And it was because the sperm whales are mining the deep canyons off the coast of Sri Lanka for all the squid that live there.
Oh well, this one won't work. Okay, I guess we're gonna end because this one's not working.
Do the fish and all that kind of stuff that live super deep down, are they affected by what happens near the surface, like by our?
I think so, because they have something
like
called
way down. I'm talking like super far.
Yeah. I think so because that's actually a way that carbon gets sequestered, right? Things go to the bottom and just sit there, and then they're out of the atmosphere. So that's getting rid of all this stuff, right? Yeah, whale fall. All the dead whales used to go to the bottom, and I think that's probably the we eat that stuff up too. Back in the good old days.
Well, and they don't fall anymore because of
It's not there anymore.
Oh.
Some whales are coming back. The gray whale, I think, is coming back, but the blue whale population haven't really done much. They're kind of stuck there, because they're so big and they're just like so vulnerable.
Yeah. Not many things can kill them though. One animal, right?
I think that like occasionally orcas eat the babies and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah.
People.
Like humans is the biggest, worst predator of all. Completely lacking balance. And cod is the biggest victim of
Oh, yeah.
most of those almost extinct at the time.
I read the book Chernobyl and what happened to it, and apparently it's a wildlife paradise now.
Oh yeah, I've heard that.
And the moral of the story is humans are worse to the environment than nuclear disaster.
Yeah, there's like giant red deer living there, like the biggest deer and all.
We saw some.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah. What got you to Chernobyl?
Just voice a lot of this, yeah.
Nice.
It was cool. We did we got in contact with this person on Instagram, and we did not super illegal, but we went into the places you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
He snuck us past the guards and we went back into the apartment buildings, and we had to go into the hospital.
There's like a big amusement park as well.
Yeah, we saw it.
Yeah,
we went there. We went to the movie. They had a big movie theater there. We got to go explore that. The hospital was the craziest part because you look in there and they have all these books full of documents, and it all stops at 1985, right? Because that happened shortly after. So you look and you see like people's birthdays and children's files, and it's just like pretty wild. But it was cool. They moved a lot of people out of there very quickly.
Visiting is one thing, but you want to move to Poland.
Not Bolton.
So where are you going to move?
Somewhere out there.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on over there.
It's very cheap.
Yeah.
But I think the most impressive thing about all of Chernobyl was that they moved the entire population out of that city in like 4 hours. 50,000 people. They bust them out. They said, come back in 3 days. And that was everything back. Yeah. No, it was really something.
How do you use the word segue? Change subject.
Segue now.
Segue.
Can we segue to how my son put his finger into a wood planer and how do we prevent it from happening?
Yeah.
again?
What did you put your finger in?
I was doing like a corner return on a staircase, and I was off by like a 16th on this piece, but it had to be right. And each time you cut the piece, you can't like shape it down because it's so small, and it's unsafe. So I cut it like twice, and I did it wrong both times. So I'm like, I'm just gonna use the planer and just shave a little bit off. And I was kind of paying attention, but not super, and my thumb got, this finger got.
And he hit himself with a chainsaw, and it just, talk about luck. It just
Barely.
oh, God.
That was, but the planer was,
I don't think I can use tools because I'm the most clumsy person.
Oh, dude, yeah, I do. My boss was, my boss was, he was standing like right next to me when it happened. Where like they were talking about, shitty 60s music or whatever. Just pop the top of the finger off.
Did you lose the nail or anything? Or?
Just the top half of it.
Yeah.
Like
This finger I got taken off in a door. I slammed the door and I was a 4-year-old. So it's like kind of a little
yeah.
So in the future, I want to get other people to talk about environmental things and about everything. Eventually, we're going to talk about mushrooms, medicinal magic mushrooms. You would recommend me bringing on that lady, but if she ever comes to San Diego, if you don't do anything on
What if you were friends with someone who's a part of the show? Would that make it easier for you?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, we're good friends with the lieutenant out in Rincon.
One of my best friends is in there.
Really? I'd like to, yeah, let's do dinner.
No, no, this guy's more of a raver. So you can have to go to a rave.
Dive
There it is.
in the audience.
Yeah, there you go. Beavers!
Shout out Isaiah.
Yeah, I tried to do Changa, and they were just like, the guy who was the environmental specialist wasn't, he'd given himself a mohawk, but he wasn't a mohawk, he was a guy from Ohio.
It's like Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, right. So he was like, hey, we don't want to do this, we're going to bullfrog. I'm like, dude, I'm talking about like saving your entire ecology here and bringing back the species which is key to your tribe. He's like,
Yeah, they're very upset at Rincon when they built the casino. Their creek was sacred to them, and now they don't have access to it.
Yeah.
For the end, but they feel like it's been
desecrated.
yes, desecrated would be the word.
Yeah, the Henshaw Reservoir, that river, the La Jolla River, Indian River, whatever it is, used to run to the ocean. Now it goes into the Escondido water supply. The entire creek goes right into the water supply. And that was full of beaver. In 1930, they took all beaver out. It's a deep beaver called Giardia. I don't think so. Beaver. Giardia.
I have it.
What is Giardia?
I have it. My dog's playing in the creek.
Species.
Oh,
Yeah, it's species from, wild animal stages with diapers on it.
You committed that really fast.
I have it.
No, he sent his stool sample into the vet.
Oh, that's different. I have tapeworm.
Oh, I forgot.
And my doctor said that it's so ridiculous he won't do a stool sample, and so I threw it in with the dogs and to the vet, and he goes, you know, this is really amazing. Dogs aren't supposed to get pinworms.
Oh, you have pinworms?
He started this whole like research on just what he thought was a dog.
That's amazing.
Well, I'm glad you got to see it.
I think we're gonna end the show. Unless we have anything else to talk about.
It has
No,
pinworms.
I had some kind of parasites. And I took a bunch of stuff to kill all the
Once again, how do we get from nuclear power to pinworms?
Garlic.
Yes.
They're close in the dictionary.
There we go.
Okay, that's all, ladies and gentlemen. That's the 26th episode of Live from Normal Heights.
Shout out Emmett.
Goodbye, everybody on Facebook. Goodbye,
Shout
everyone
out
on
to Emmett.
YouTube. Instagram already ended. How do I?